We're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock and I'm Michelle Dewberry. Wowzers! Did you see it? Rishi Sunak, he has just announced a new approach to net zero, sensationally watering down some of the key policies. Policies, by the way, which would have cost households a small fortune. You tell me, is this great news or is it climate suicide? You decide. And talking of good news, have you seen as well inflation coming down again? Don't you tell me it's all doom and gloom out there. But I'm asking you, are good times in sight now, or do we still have a long way to go? Do you personally feel any better off? And HS2, let's face it, it is completely over budget, completely over its timings, and it's completely confused as to what on earth it actually is and where on earth it is and isn't going to go. Is it time now to basically sack the entire thing off? Or is it infrastructure that this country is desperate for? And this face, do you remember him? John Venables? Ugh, he, of course, is the killer of James Bulger. Well, he has been back in prison since 2017, convicted for a second time of possessing child abuse images. And get this, he's now up for parole. Should he be? What on earth's going on? We've got it all to come. But before we get into it, let's grab tonight's latest headlines.
Michelle, thank you. Well, the top story today is that the Prime Minister has set out revised plans to his net zero plans in a controversial overhaul of the government's green policies. Among the measures announced this afternoon was a weakening of the phasing out of residential gas boilers, as well as easing the transition to electric vehicles by pushing back a ban on new petrol and diesel cars until 2035. Rishi Sunak said he wanted a more pragmatic and realistic approach to net zero, which eases the burden on the British people and, more importantly, has their consent.
We do not have to be powerless. Our future doesn't have to be a foregone conclusion. Our destiny can be our own choosing, but only if we change the way our politics works. Can we be brave in the decisions we make, even if there is a political cost? Can we be honest when the facts change, even if it's awkward? And can we put the long-term interests of our country before the short-term political needs of the moment, even if it means being controversial?
Well, that was at number 10 this afternoon, and the move has already ignited a significant backlash. More than 250 charities and business are now urging the government not to weaken green targets. Shadow Paymaster General Jonathan Ashworth says the Prime Minister's decision will put pressure on households.
What weak Rishi Sunak has done today, pushed into it by Liz Truss and other right-wing Tory MPs, is undermine a crucial bit of our economy, undermine a crucial bit of our growth strategy in this country. We should be taking advantage of the transition to electric vehicles to bring bills down for people in this country. Today's decision by Rishi Sunak is going to cost people more in this country because of his weakness.
Well, away from net zero and onto the economy, and the government's plan to deal with inflation is working. That's according to the Chancellor. Data out this morning shows the rate of inflation fell to 6.7% in August. That's down from 6.8% in July, helped by falling food prices. The Bank of England had predicted the figure to increase to more than 7%. And it comes ahead of another expected interest rate increase tomorrow, which might end up being the bank's 15th rise in a row. The Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, says despite the fall, inflation is still too high.
The path to lowering inflation is never easy because it doesn't happen in a straight line. But if you look at the overall picture since it peaked last autumn, it is now down 40%. And that says the plan is working. But even at 6.7%, that is a lot of pain for ordinary families who are seeing their shopping bills go up, their fuel prices go up. And that is why it is essential that we continue to stick to that plan, deliver the Prime Minister's pledge and the Bank of England's target, get it right down to 2%.
The King and Queen are in France as part of a 3-day state visit celebrating shared history, culture and values. They were greeted earlier on today by President Emmanuel Macron and his wife at a ceremony of remembrance at the Arc de Triomphe. The King then went on to the Élysée Palace, where he gave the President a book containing photographs of the pair. And this evening, the royal couple's attending a state banquet at the Palace of Versailles. Now, consultants and junior doctors took unprecedented industrial action today, holding their first ever joint strike, manning picket lines during a walkout over pay. Thousands of BMA medics have stopped work at NHS hospitals across England, delaying operations and placing more pressure on the NHS. Meanwhile, thousands of London Underground workers at a walkout amid a long-running dispute over job cuts and safety concerns. The RMT union saying strike action will hit commuters in the capital on the 4th and the 6th of next month. The Home Secretary says plans by a social media giant to introduce end-to-end encryption will create a safe haven for paedophiles. Meta, which owns Facebook, Instagram and WhatsApp, plans to make the encryption settings standard on all one-to-one chats by the end of the year. Suella Braverman says, though, that the change will hamper efforts to carry out vital investigation work. She's calling on the company to work with the government to ensure adequate safety measures are put in place. Now, you may have noticed today was a bit dark and windy across much of the UK as remnants of Hurricane Nigel swept across the country. Flood warnings are in place in parts of northern England and Wales, with unsettled conditions due to continue this weekend. Heavy rain expected in the western regions of our country as well, with higher altitude areas such as Snowdonia. And we know now that that's called Aurora. If you're in Wales and in the rest of the UK, that was officially made Aurora. But some people know it still as Snowdonia in Wales, potentially seeing even heavier downpours today. Batten down the hatches. You're with GB News across the UK on TV, in your car on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. This is Britain's news channel.
Thank you very much for the Polly. I'm saying absolutely nothing about Hurricane Nigel. Make of that what you will. You know the drill on this programme, don't you? It's about my panel, but also it's very much about you guys at home. And I want to start this programme by speaking directly to you because I want to say thank you, if you don't mind indulging me, because yesterday was a fantastic news day when it came to ratings for us here at GB News. In particular, my programme as well, we absolutely smashed it. And it's all thanks to you guys for taking your time to spend your dinner time, your tea time, whatever we call it, here with me, joining into the debate. We had double the viewers of Sky News in the same time frame. And I don't know about you, but I find that a massive achievement. So I just wanted to say thank you to each and every one of you, again, for spending your time with us. You know the drill, don't you? GBviews at gbnews.com is how you join the conversation. Any questions you've got for me or for the panel or anything you want to get off your chest, quite frankly, your views are always very much welcome. You could tweet me as well at GB News. And speaking of my panel, I'm joined this evening by by, and I bet he can't believe my timing because just as I'm about to announce him, he started coughing. It is the columnist for the Daily Mail, Peter Hitchens, and the director of the UK-based education charity, Wellright, Kerry Dingle. Hello, good evening to both of you. You got your water, we're all right, we're good to go?
So far.
Well,
Make
top...
personal remarks.
Pardon?
If you're going to make personal remarks.
Oh, we're all right. We're all right. He's all right. He's got his water. We know what we're doing. Rishi Sunak, have you seen it? The top news story today. He has made what I would call some drastic U-turns when it comes to the whole plan for how on earth this government is going to achieve net zero. It was quite a long speech, as you've just been hearing some of the highlights in the headlines there. In essence, petrol and diesel cars. Some of the deadlines there move from 2030 to 2035, similar as well with new gas boilers. It's talking about the off-grid oil boilers as well. Their deadlines there are going to be pushed back. You're no longer going to require homeowners and landlords and all the rest of it to meet those energy efficiency targets. And as well, good news for the poorest households because they will now be exempt from the ban on new gas boilers from 2035. Lots of help as well for households when it comes to some of the funds available, 50% rises in some of them. Let's just remind ourselves as well of some of the other things that he treated us to.
The debate about how we get to net zero has thrown up a range of worrying proposals. And today I want to confirm that under this government, they will never happen. The proposal for government to interfere in how many passengers you can have in your car, I've scrapped it. The proposal that we should force you to have 7 different bins in your home, I've scrapped it. The proposal to make you change your diet and harm British farmers by taxing meat, or to create new taxes to discourage flying or going on holiday, I've scrapped those too. And nor will we ban new oil and gas in the North Sea, which would simply leave us reliant on expensive imported energy from foreign dictators like Putin. We will never impose these unnecessary and heavy-handed measures on you, the British people.
What did he do? Was you chatting along at home? Scrapped it. I can tell you that. The goings-on tonight have divided opinion. And to debate this, I am joined tonight by the author of Not Zero, Ross Clark, and also former Labour Special Advisor, Paul Richards. Good evening, gentlemen. If I can I just start by rewinding? Because I want to ask the question about whether or not it was right for this country, the UK, to have basically enshrined the Not Zero target into law in the first place. I'll direct that initially to you, Ross.
Yeah, well, the whole Net Zero project has been a sort of triumph of hope over reality. It's been about governments setting targets, deadlines and so on, without any idea of how they can be fulfilled, what it will cost, what the impact will be on individuals, families, businesses and so on. And what Rishi Sunak has done today is really just inject a little bit more reality into that debate and say, well, look, yes, the costs do matter, and yes, we do need to look at the impact on people because, you know, frankly, the policies as they were going to impose huge costs and inconvenience on ordinary people who might find themselves driven off the road, unable to heat their homes properly, and facing bills of tens of thousands of pounds to upgrade their homes.
Paul?
Well, he's run the white flag up, hasn't he, in terms of net zero? He claims he wants the target, but he's abolished all the means to achieve it. He has made us all a little bit smaller on the world stage. We've thrown away whatever advantage we had as a world leader. And the biggest loser today is British business, because business, as you will know, Michelle, craves stability and needs to know what to do in terms of long-term planning. By chopping and changing like this, he's thrown all of that stability out of the window. He talks about bravery in his speech. Where was the bravery to hold a general election? That's what we were expecting from when the announcement came that he was speaking. He could have put this to the people. He's got no mandate for any of this stuff. Nobody voted for him. And he's even flunked that.
I want to come back to you, Paul, in just a second about that particular business question. But, Ross, on this whole kind of world stage notion, the fact that we, Britain, should somehow be leading the way, racing even faster than people like the EU in some cases to achieve these targets. I mean, we are responsible for about 1% of some of these emissions. Do we really need to be pioneering and leading the way?
Well, Britain cannot tackle climate change, reduce carbon emissions on its own. As you say, we're less than 1% of global emissions. But when we started this, or when Britain set this net zero target in 2019, it was with the idea that would inspire other countries to follow suit. Now, we're 4 years down the line. There's, I think, about 17 other countries have legally committed themselves to reach net zero by 2050 or some other date. The world's two biggest emitters, US and China, have completely refused to set legally binding targets. They have aspirations, but not legally binding targets. And, frankly, what we were doing, what we're still doing to some extent, is to sacrifice our own industry, sacrifice our own living standards when others are not following suit. And the idea that, British business was somehow going to benefit from net zero promise, I'm sorry, it's just completely ludicrous. You look where the green jobs have gone in the past decade. They've gone to China or to the US now that Joe Biden is, pumping these huge subsidies into US businesses, green businesses. The green economy in the UK, as measured by the Office of National Statistics, has hardly grown in a whole decade of, these net zero targets and so on. It's simply not creating jobs in Britain. But what net zero is doing is piling on costs on ordinary people and piling costs on business. And you look at, a company like German BASF, that's a prime example. German company, it's announced last year that it's not going to invest in Europe anymore. It's building a £10 billion plant in China. Why? Because energy is cheaper there. It says energy is far too expensive in Europe now to justify investment there. And why is that? In part, it's due to net zero promises and which have driven up energy prices.
And final word to you on this, Paul. Back on your business point there, to echo some of the things that Ross was just saying. Absolutely, I agree with your sentiment earlier about stability and certainty and all the rest of it. But there's no point in having certainty of a direction of travel if you've got a bankrupt population in the meantime that can't afford to spend their money there anyway.
Well, Ross mentioned China and he mentioned the US, and what both of those countries have done in very different ways is invest in their industries so that they can capitalise on the crisis and actually turn the crisis into an opportunity. And that's one thing this government under Sunak and his predecessors have completely failed to do. So if you look at Biden's intervention, the Inflation Reduction Act, billions of pounds of taxpayers' money going in to help the economy and create green jobs, which then, of course, the money comes back. It goes round again. People have jobs, they pay taxes. The exchequer grows as a result of this kind of intervention. So that's what we're lacking in this country. We lack leadership already, but now he's run the white flag up. No other country is going to want to invest here, and no other country is going to want to take our lead because we've just decided to march in the opposite direction. It's a really sad day for Britain on the world stage today, Michelle.
Cool, blimey. Well, there you go. Different opinions on that. But for now, Ross Clark and Paul Richards, thank you for your insight. I'll throw that open to you guys at home. A sad day for the UK on the world stage. Do you agree with that final sentiment there? I've got to say, Peter, this notion of, Britain's got to be this on the world stage, we've got to be that on the world stage. Well, actually, I think what Britain's got to be doing is making sure we're looking after the citizens of this country first and foremost and not bankrupting them.
Well, I'm very sorry to break this to anybody who thinks differently, but there is no world stage, and most people in countries abroad think very little of Britain. They don't know much about us, they don't care much about us. We long ago ceased to be the major world power, which some people still weirdly imagine that we were. They're not looking saying, oh, the British are destroying all their industries, the British are imposing ridiculous costs upon themselves, let's do the same, because they're the British and they have the Union Jack. That sentiment has not gone through the mind of anybody, anywhere, ever, and it's a fantasy that we can lead the world. I remember the nuclear disarmament people used to say the same thing, that if Britain would only get rid of its nuclear weapons, then obviously everybody else would, like the Russians and the Americans. Nonsense even then, when we were a more important country than we are now. So that's no use. It's quite bizarre. I mean, let's assume for a moment that the arguments of the net zero people are correct and that we are all doomed unless we hugely reduce the world output of carbon dioxide, then we really have to turn to China and to India and to the United States, which produce immensely more of it than we do. We, in this country, have in the past 15 years, I've watched it happen near me, closed down and then blown up large numbers of coal-fired power stations, while the Chinese have been building probably about 20 or 30 times as many. What good did that do?
Well, what good did it do? You tell me. Kerry Dingle, what do you make to Rishi's U-turns, ideas, whatever you want to call them tonight?
Well, I'd say it's better than 'twas, step in a better direction, but it doesn't go nearly far enough, in my view, because I do see net zero as willful self-impoverishment, you know, to be honest. And I think we have to... I was shocked by a couple of things he said. I mean, he said something really stupid when he said, yes, of course I'm for net zero. I realise, you know, the dangers of climate change. Just look at Libya last week. And I'm thinking, hang on a minute, that's a failed state, failed infrastructure and a kleptocracy.
Well, it's failed because his predecessor, David Cameron,
example. But for me, what is the point of all the pain that our green elites are trying to impose if, and Peter's mentioned some of it, it's not going to do us any good. It's just going to do harm and make us less able to deal with what climate change does throw at us, because we will need more energy for a start.
Well, I can tell you, there was criticism of Rishi Sunak being inaction man. Do you remember that? As he suddenly sprung into action, so Lindsay Hoyle, he was furious at Rishi Sunak's approach today, the way that he did it. Of course, he was pushed into doing this at this time because of leaks around his ideas and all the rest of it. But I want to know your thoughts. How do you feel about the announcements tonight? Get in touch, gbviews at gbnews.com. I'll have some of your feedback after the break.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 o'clock. Columnist for the Daily Mail, Peter Hitchens, alongside me, as is the director of the UK-based education charity, WorldRight, which is Kerry Dingle. We've just been talking about UK's reputation on the world stage when it comes to us pioneering and leading the way on things like net zero. There's a sentiment coming through from you guys. Who cares about our reputation on the world stage? You're saying that much of the world stage doesn't really seem to care about us. Alistair says, can you ask everyone watching and listening to ask themselves a simple question? As a species, would you rather sacrifice now to maintain your future or sacrifice our future to maintain now? Deep. I like it. I'll leave it with the viewers to ponder it. Lots of support, I have to say, for Rishi Sunak and some of the things and decisions and U-turns that he has been making. Tony, when it comes to the world stage as well, among others, pointing out the fact that the likes of China and India, the US, etc., they're not doing similar things when it comes to perhaps reducing their emissions at speed. So what is the point? That is a sentiment that's coming through thick and fast as well. Now, every day, let's be honest now, there is a lot of depressing news in the media. I'm sure we all feel that, right? So any excuse to celebrate something positive. And I have to focus on this a little bit tonight because every single month, pretty much, it feels like I'm banging on about inflation. Oh, it's going up and up and up. Everything's getting out of control. Well, of course, today we've had the news that we've had an unexpected fall in inflation. It is down again, this time to 6.7%. I've got to say, though, that food prices, they are certainly nowhere near that kind of rate. We've got an interest rate rise decision happening tomorrow, again, from the Bank of England. Do you feel like it's a good news day then? Do you sit there, Kerry, and think, brilliant, inflation's coming down, I feel wealthier, it's a positive day?
Oh, I'm so sorry to disappoint.
Don't ruin it. Don't ruin it.
I'm so sorry, I'm going to ruin it for you. No, not really. I just think it's come down by a marginal amount. Yes, that's good. But is that something to celebrate about? No, because I think the obsession with inflation, unfortunately, is about sort of saying rising prices are causing rising prices, entirely tautological. It doesn't deal with Britain's stagnation, low productivity, our inability to make stuff, and so higher prices are chasing less stuff, or the fact that we've had the most rubbish government policies that have led us to this situation, failed to deal with the underlying problem. So I don't think there's anything to celebrate. I think we should actually get annoyed that we're not...
Name your worst policy. What's the worst policy that you think has had the most impact on inflation rising?
I would say that the worst policy has been the failure to invest in infrastructure and energy.
Well, I would say probably things like quantitative easing, pumping out
I would agree with you on that too.
During the likes of COVID. Anyway, Peter, your thoughts?
Well, it's quite obvious. I told you at the time, if you do what the government did during the Great Panic, the huge burning down the house to get rid of a wasp's nest during the COVID era, if you spend, as the government did, vast quantities of money you do not have, you'll get inflation. I predicted it. I got a C in economic history at A-level, but even I can tell you that. It's perfectly obvious, and it duly happened. And it continues to happen. And what inflation is, and I can tell you this too, it's not prices rising, it's money shrinking. And it works through. And in the end, after you've shrunk the money, after a certain amount of time, prices stop rising because the money shrinks, people get used to the higher prices. These monthly figures don't mean anything. And the idea that by making it more expensive to borrow money, you're going to bring down inflation is so catastrophically, ludicrously idiotic that I just have to go and lie down every time anybody mentions it.
But then...
I mean, interest rates were too low for a long time, no question of that, but it certainly won't do anything to reduce inflation to raise them now. And it's got nothing to do with it. You can't squeeze inflation out of an economy. If the government has spent vast quantities of non-existent money, and this government did that, then this is how you pay for it.
But then the flip side will be there'll be viewers watching me saying, Michelle, Peter, what you on about? What choice did the government have? There was a global pandemic. They had to, some people would argue, shut it down.
Choice is not to panic. They should have done what Sweden did and not panic. And then we wouldn't be suffering this. But they did panic, and we are. And anyone can accuse me of hindsight on this if they like, but they're wrong, because I said it all the time. And I'm now saying it again, because very soon they'll think of another reason to have a major panic. In fact, in some ways, the net zero obsession is a sort of long-term, slow-motion form of a similar panic, in which government gets the idea between its teeth that it wants to do something, however mad it is, and it does it, and it damages the economy. All this goes back to David Cameron embracing the green ideology. You remember Hugger Husky and all that stuff? He suddenly decided the Conservative Party would never get any young voters unless it went green. So it went green overnight and became obsessively green and committed the country to all kinds of crazy targets, which cannot be met without doing immense damage and quite possibly do no good at all.
And Graham,
it's where we are. The people who govern us are not very bright. Once you've cracked that, you've cracked almost everything else.
He's a harsh man, isn't he? Graham, my viewer, he points out, well, yeah, Michelle, fascinating, but what about food and fuel? Absolutely right, 13.6% is fuel inflation in this country. How much of that do you reckon, Kerry, briefly, is down to greedflation?
Well, I think there is an element in which businesses, you know, are putting their prices up in this situation. They certainly will. And, you know, the fact that, you know, eggs are twice what they were last summer, you know, basic staples, you know, it doesn't just seem like 13.5% on some stuff. It feels more like 50% for most people's weekly shop. And even if you go to the cheapest markets, it's still a nightmare.
Well, one of the things that Rishi Sunak was talking about in his speech today about net zero, he was cross-referencing back to his 5 priorities and basically saying he was making great headways into that. Is he? Can you even remember what those 5 priorities were? Royston has been in touch and he says, about the whole Rishi Sunak situation, Michelle, you say you are a lifelong Conservative, but you are saying that you do not believe Rishi Sunak in some of the things that he's saying. You're saying, or you're suggesting, that actually this is all about politics. It's all about, you know, getting through the next election and securing votes. You're saying that you don't trust Rishi Sunak. And Royston goes as far as saying he's a backstabber. Do you agree with that? Is that a little bit harsh? One question, please. Do you think it is possible, basically? This question here is from Samantha, and one of the comments here she's making is about this notion that renewables and all the rest of it, the energy there is a lot cheaper than things like fossil fuels, pointing out things about the levies, all of the levies and the subsidies and how they are perhaps unfairly influencing how cheap or not our energy is in this country. Well, anyway, when it comes to renewables, you need the wind to blow. Hurricane Nigel is about. Let's take a look at the weather and see what's going on.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again, I'm Alex Burkle and here's your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Some heavy rain across parts of the southeast clearing away overnight, but blustery showers in the northwest and some sunny skies on Thursday. Meanwhile, at the moment we are under the influence of low pressure just to the north of the UK, and we have a cold front lying across southeastern parts, and it's this front that is bringing some intense heavy downpours as we go through the rest of today, gradually clearing away towards the east overnight. Behind it, some clear skies developing though. Notice some showers towards western parts of Wales and England and some hefty rain across the far northwest of the UK. With the clear skies, temperatures are going to dip a little bit lower than some recent nights. Most towns and cities, though, holding up in double figures. Thursday is going to be a brighter, sunnier day than it has been recently, for most of us at least. Some showers already across western and perhaps far southern coastal areas of England and Wales. These becoming more widespread as we go through into the afternoon. Across Scotland and Northern Ireland, a bit more cloud here and some heavy showery rain feeding in, and this could turn thundery at times. Temperatures likely to be a touch down compared to today, but still getting to highs of around 19, possibly 20 Celsius. Through Friday then, it again is going to get off to a largely bright start, but we will see showers becoming widespread as we head into the afternoon. Some of them could still be heavy, perhaps even thundery, and notably still windy across the far northwest. But things are going to ease down as we go through later Friday, so Saturday should get off to a chilly start before the rain returns on Sunday.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, back to me. Patricia, she says about Rishi Sunak, you say completely disagree with that previous viewer there. You say Rishi Sunak has gone up in your estimation. You say it is fantastic to see common sense prevailing in UK politics finally. Nigel says, I am a socialist, but Sunak is winning my vote. Again, he says it's common sense. Graham says, well, I'm in Scotland. What's going to happen here? Will this affect us, or will the SNP throw a spanner in the works? Well, keep your thoughts coming in. gbviews@gbnews.com is how you reach me. Do not go anywhere. I've got lots coming your way, not least HS2. I want to ask you, is it time to sack the whole thing off? And, of course, awful story, the killer of Jamie Bulger. Well, he is up for parole. Should he ever see the light of day again? You tell me, and I'll see you in a couple of minutes.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Dewbs and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton, for 2 hours packed full of unfiltered opinions, unique takes and fiery debates. I guarantee you blockbuster guests and exclusive reporting with no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I think there is a culture of collusion, quite frankly.
And no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry with you till 7. Columnist for the Daily Mail, Peter Hitchens, and the director of the UK-based education charity, Wellright, Kerry Dingle, alongside me. I want to talk to you about HS2. I laugh when I even hear the phrase HS2 because if you actually know what it currently actually is, then please clarify that for me, because there have been so many chops and changes to this project, of which I'm going to actually get some of the plans up on the screen whilst we're talking so we could all refresh our memory. But I've got to say, there's been so many conversations, and I'll be playing it as we're going. There have been so many different branches to this. Some people will talk about HS3 as well, Northern Powerhouse Rail and all the rest of it. But these kind of projects, lots of them now, we've got to the point where we're over budget, over time, over-complicated now. No one really knows what's going on. Is it time just to sack the whole thing off, Peter?
I think it probably is. I think we would, although doubtless the contract is full of clauses which include enormous penalties for doing so. It will still cost us less if we cut it off now, if we carry on ludicrously hoping that it will ever be finished or do any good. It was a stupid idea in the first place. One of the reasons why it's being built is because nobody anymore studies the basic subjects of geography and didn't look at a map. The landscape and size of this country simply isn't suited to high-speed rail. We don't need it. What we need in this country is medium-speed rail between major cities and also between the large numbers of towns which were cut off from the railway system in the mad Beeching Marples cuts of the 1960s. Those could have been restored for the money which is being spent on this gigantic white dinosaur, and that would have done some good. We just don't need it. You can get from London to Birmingham quite quickly by train if you want to. There are 2 lines that already do it, and if you want to expand and improve the freight capacity along that general direction, then there is the perfectly good Great Central Line, which again was butchered under the Beeching Marples cuts in the 1960s and could very largely be replaced and restored and would create an enormous amount of new freight and passenger capacity in the middle of the country. All these things are available, but it had to be a grand project. It had to be something that people could boast about. It had to look flashy, and so that's what we chose, and this is how we pay for it. And I doubt it will ever be finished. At the moment, it looks set to go from nowhere to nowhere. It's a political rather than a transport project, and had all the disadvantages of that.
Well, a decade ago, if you'd have asked people about the costings for HS2 finishing it all, they'd have said about 33 billion. If you ask someone that now, they'll say about 100 billion. Where are you on HS2? Do we need it? Sack it off or what?
I do think it's just gross mismanagement, and it worries me that, not because I've got any illusions that Britain is doing anything on the world stage, but I do think there's something seriously wrong with a country that can't manage major infrastructure projects. You know, the Elizabeth line is worked out at a stupid amount of money per mile.
Yeah, hang on,
No, I'm just saying everything we try, we cock up. I do want, however, to defend the need for speed. I do think we need a railway system that is fit for the 21st century and not just, you know, repairs to our existing old Victorian infrastructure.
But why does it have to go very fast? It doesn't. A lot of the current trains are doing 120, 125 miles an hour. Isn't that fast enough? The densely populated area of this country which can be served by express trains is actually quite small. The map of France shows you the distance between major French cities is far greater. Same with Spain, same with Germany. Their high-speed rail is justified. Here it isn't. What we need is good medium-speed, reliable intercity trains, which we seem incapable of doing. Yes, it's true we can't do anything anymore. That's because we destroyed our education system in the 1960s and removed most of the best schools from it and then destroyed the Polytechnic. So we also wrecked an area of education which taught people precisely how to do such projects. And then we privatised the railways, which had a huge store of centuries of experience, which we scattered to the winds. So, yeah, there are lots of other things going on. But the whole idea of high-speed rail is not particularly modern. It doesn't. You don't have to have very fast trains to have a modern railway system.
When we talk about high-speed rail, if you're wondering how quick is high speed, the minimum speed apparently you've got to reach to be able to be considered high-speed train is 155 miles an hour on dedicated tracks. The Elizabeth line, in case you're wondering what Kerry was talking about, that is basically like a tube line in London. You talk about, you know, not managing infrastructure projects properly. I completely agree with you. But this whole notion, some would argue that actually it was all about levelling up. Do you agree with the project from that? Ignore the mismanagement and overrunning, but the concept of HS2 being something that would help level up the country?
I'm not sure that it would, but I mean, I'm sure that it might have some spin-off in terms of jobs in the north, but it's not even going to get to the north now. That's the tragedy of the whole thing. As far as we know, if it reaches Birmingham, it'll be amazing. And Peter's point was it might not even get to London anyway.
Well, it's now scheduled to arrive not in the central London station, but in all
just somewhere miles
suburbs of London. There's actually a perfectly good reason for that, but it isn't. If you're travelling from centre to centre, if you're selling the thing on being very fast, then putting a stopping train on the end of it is crazy. And it completely defeats the purpose of it.
I don't think it ever had huge potential in terms of levelling up, but I do think high-speed, electrified, interurban trains and roads and networks and decent infrastructure in this country is badly needed. You know, it does feel like we're crumbling and incapable, and surely that's crazy.
Around the city where I live, which is Oxford, there are, I think, 6 large, medium-sized market towns, which until 1965 had their own connections to the railway network. All of them have been robbed of it. Ludicrously, if you want to make a train journey from any of them, you have to drive to a railhead somewhere else. This is the case all over the country. Significant, important towns are not on the railway network. With the money that we have wasted on HS2, we could have reconnected them, and we should have done. We still should do it, but this is a lesson. Plan for something worth having. The high speed is just flash stuff. It doesn't actually solve any real major transport problems.
Well, can you imagine if Rishi Sunak did actually come out, make that tough decision and say, you know what, we're scrapping the lot. The media, Labour, they'd never let him live it down because of all of the investment and money that has been spent so far. Susan says if anyone supports HS2, then they should come up to where I live in Leamington Spa, see the destruction to the countryside, and then tell me whether or not you still agree with it. Martin says, we're going to have 15-minute cities soon, so you won't need all these trains to get you absolutely everywhere. Ian says, fine, keep HS2, but only for freight. And Joe says, if this was ever supposed to be about levelling up, why did so much of the project and the starts and all the rest of it commence in and around the south, and the conversations about connecting, say, the Midlands, for example, to London quicker? He says, why wasn't all of the northern elements of this prioritised, particularly something I'm passionate about, the whole east to west thing. Good luck if anyone is indeed trying to get east to west in this country.
There is an attempt, but it isn't getting anything like the same amount of money and investment.
Very good point.
And again, that was destroyed. I used to travel on the east-west line. That was destroyed again in the 1960s.
Well, yeah, and a lot of these strikes anyway. Good luck getting anywhere on the trains these days. But anyway,
the railway companies are much worse than the strike.
I have a very important topic I want to discuss with you after the break. The child murderer, of course, John Venables, a name that makes my skin crawl. He is up for parole to be potentially released from prison. Should he be? You tell me.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dewbs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, till 7, columnist for the Daily Mail, Peter Hitchens, and the director of UK-based education charity World Rights, Kerry Dingle, alongside me. In the break, we were just talking about Hurricane Nigel. Peter said he doesn't think that sounds very ferocious. Nigel, I was just pointing out there's a boxer, Nigel Benn. I think so, isn't there, Nigel Benn? I don't think I'm making that up. You tell me.
But it's still, as a name for a hurricane, it seems to me to be.
Do they ever name hurricanes after women? Because I've got to say, a lot of the women I know, they are far more ferocious than some of the men that I know. I don't know, you weather experts can get in touch and tell me. But for now, I want to talk to you about a very serious, horrific situation. Now, we will all be familiar, I'm sure, with the horrendous murder of James Bulger. And one of his killers, again, a name that you will be familiar with, gives me goosebumps, John Venables. He is in the news again today. Ugh, it's an awful day when this happens because you kind of know what it means. Long story short, the guy is in prison. He is in prison because he has been looking at indecent images of children. He is again up for parole. It's a special 2-day-long parole hearing. As I understand it, it will most likely be conducted in private. It makes my skin crawl. I am not in charge of this country, but if I was, firstly, you would never have been out of prison in your first place when you've done that to James Bulger. You would then never be coming out of prison again if you can't stop yourself from reoffending, and I would be delighted if he never saw the light of day again. Peter, do you agree or not?
Well, not really. And I remember when all this happened, being up on Merseyside, writing about it and trying to make some sense of it. And I have to say that I couldn't, and I still can't. I couldn't work out why this had happened, why the two boys had behaved like that. I couldn't think of anything remotely comforting to say to the bereaved family of the small boy who was so horribly killed. I still can't. I couldn't work out what on earth could wisely or compassionately or sensibly or in any way be done about 10-year-old boys who'd killed another child. And I still can't. And I'm left just wondering what on earth I have to say that's of any use about this either. You can have as strong opinions about it as you like. I'm as appalled by the killing and as grieved by the death of the child as anybody is, and as full of sympathy for those bereaved as anybody is. But I can't see any particular purpose in saying anything else. It just leaves us
I've got a question
completely
for you.
baffled.
I've got a question.
I am baffled by it. I just am.
Yeah, I've got a question for you. And this is not a young boy, by the way, this John Venables fella. He's
now,
40 now. Kerry Dingle, where are you on it? No, he was 10 when he did it. You're quite right. Kerry Dingle.
Well, I do feel that we should have a little bit more faith in the parole board.
You what?
No, I really do.
John War
because
boys?
I do, you know, they've got hundreds of pages of evidence and witness testimonies, and I don't believe that the parole boards are sat there for 2 days thinking, how can I make life worse for the public? I really don't. And I do think they have got, you know, like all of us, the public interest at heart over someone whose activity, you know, since he was let out age 18, has been heinous in that he's revisited, you know, child porn and all this kind of stuff. So I have no sympathy for John Venables, by the way. I do recognise it was a horrific crime committed by children, which, as Peter says, is pretty inexplicable. But I don't go with this emotional gut reaction helping anyone. I don't think it helps the relatives, and I don't think lock away the key or lock them away forever or hang them and flog them helps anyone.
I do just want to say, because a lot of people use this phrase that you just used then about, oh, he might be looking at child porn. Just to be absolutely clear, there's no such thing as child porn. You don't look at child porn. A child can't be a porn star. When you look at so-called child porn, you're looking at a crime scene and you're looking at a child that has been abused. I just want to clear that up. And I also want to clear up some of the stuff that this disgusting human being, John Venables, has done. Some of the things that he's done since murder murdering James Bulger. He's done things like posed online as a 35-year-old woman who'd been abusing her 8-year-old daughter. He's had to have 4 separate new identities, apparently. Disgusting. That in itself I take issue with, Peter Hitchens.
What do you take issue with?
Why does this man, who by now, he is probably the same age there or thereabouts as me, I don't want to come across him in the street.
No.
I certainly don't want to develop a friendship with him. I would certainly never want to come across him on a dating site. Get away from me. I would like to know who you are and keep a wide berth. When you develop this whole new identity of this man, he could become one of my friends. I would have no idea. That's not OK.
Well, what is the alternative? You can either keep him locked up for the rest of his life, and there is, in cases such as this, it seems to me, an argument for locking people up, not necessarily in prison conditions, but in conditions of where they're prevented from ever going out into the world, but not in actual prison conditions. There's an argument for that if you want. Because ultimately the prison sentences which he can serve are, I suppose, limited in law and also limited in other ways. But you can't, if you let the other James Bulger killer has been given a new identity, and as far as I know has not reoffended in any way. Do you think the giving of a new identity to him was an error? Do you think he shouldn't be? He should be compelled to live under his actual name, and people should have known who he was.
Yeah, I do.
How long do you think that would have lasted in reality?
Well, do you know what? If you want to go around torturing 2-year-old children, then unfortunately, and we part ways, we don't agree on these kind of things, I'm aware of that, but if you go around torturing children, then you know what? You live with the consequences of your actions.
But those consequences should be decided by law, not by a group of people you meet in Lidl.
Well, as I always say to all of my regular viewers, it is a damn fine job that I am not in charge of this country, because if I was...
Well, I think that's rather true, actually, yes.
Yeah, but it wouldn't even be in front of a parole board. What are you doing, even being considered for parole, when you are a multiple repeat offender? You are disgusting, and I hope you never, ever, ever see the light of day again. Quite frankly, I've got to say there's not much sympathy coming through for John Venables or whatever.
No one's asking for sympathy for him.
Anyway,
nobody's asked for sympathy for him at all.
We'll debate it again another day, I'm sure. For now, time flies. Thank you for watching. Nigel Farage up next.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again, I'm Alex Burkle and here's your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Some heavy rain across parts of the southeast clearing away overnight, but blustery showers in the northwest and some sunny skies on Thursday. Meanwhile, at the moment we are under the influence of low pressure just to the north of the UK, and we have a cold front lying across southeastern parts, and it's this front that is bringing some intense heavy downpours as we go through the rest of today, gradually clearing away towards the east overnight. Behind it, some clear skies developing though. Notice some showers towards western parts of Wales and England and some hefty rain across the far northwest of the UK. With the clear skies, temperatures are going to dip a little bit lower than some recent nights. Most towns and cities, though, holding up in double figures. Thursday is going to be a brighter, sunnier day than it has been recently, for most of us at least. Some showers already across western and perhaps far southern coastal areas of England and Wales. These becoming more widespread as we go through into the afternoon. Across Scotland and Northern Ireland, a bit more cloud here and some heavy showery rain feeding in, and this could turn thundery at times. Temperatures likely to be a touch down compared to today, but still getting to highs of around 19, possibly 20 Celsius. Through Friday then, it again is going to get off to a largely bright start, but we will see showers becoming widespread as we head into the afternoon. Some of them could still be heavy, perhaps even thundery, and notably still windy across the far northwest. But things are going to ease down as we go through later Friday, so Saturday should get off to a chilly start before the rain returns on Sunday.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasts,